Today, I'm excited to be interviewing Nick McMahon, the founder of Enterprise Asset Solutions, which is an IT asset disposition and recycling company based in Omaha, Nebraska. Nick's company is helping businesses across the region properly manage their end-of-life technology equipment. Nick has built Enterprise Asset Solutions into a trusted partner for companies seeking secure disposal of everything from laptops and smartphones to large-scale server infrastructure, while maximizing asset recovery value and ensuring complete data destruction. With the increasing importance of cybersecurity, environmental responsibility, and regulatory compliance, Nick's expertise in IT asset disposition has become more valuable than ever. Nick, thank you so much for taking the time to share your insights into this important but often overlooked area of business operations.
Yeah, Ken, thank you a lot for having me. Appreciate the opportunity to talk a little bit about what I do and what my company does. I'm really
Yes.
passionate about it. Been doing it for a long time, and I hope to share a little bit about how the industry works and hope that maybe we can bring in some additional clients and make sure that we help people comply with some of the regulations surrounding IT asset disposition.
Excellent. Well, Nick, before we dive into your solutions, let's help our viewers understand what's really at stake here. What are companies actually risking, both financially and from a security standpoint, when they take shortcuts like stuffing old laptops in storage closets or throwing servers in dumpsters or just handing equipment off to the lowest bidder instead of using proper IT asset disposition services?
Well, Ken, there's a lot at stake here. First, you have the environmental impact. It's just not a good business practice to be putting e-waste into the landfill. Some components, they have lead, mercury, other hazardous materials. Recycling e-waste also reduces the need to mine new rare earth metals, such as gold and copper. But then you have to look at the public image aspect of it. If a member of the public drives by your organization and sees you filling a dumpster with hazardous waste, it could leave them with an impression that you don't care about the community you operate in. You're willing to allow these items to be thrown into the dumpster rather than recycling responsibility. There's also security risks involved with it. If you put servers, computers, or whatever you may be disposing of in a closet or storage warehouse tucked away for years, who's going to remember if that data has been wiped? Who's going to remember what data is on there? Whose hands is that going to be in the future when that warehouse is emptied? There's too many risks, too many unknowns. When you choose an IT asset disposition provider, we know how to handle that sensitive data. And most providers have processes and procedures in place, such as chain of custody and secure limited access facilities, things like that. Those are all things that really go into play for proper IT asset disposition.
Great. All right. Well, thank you. So, Nick, what drew you to the IT asset disposition industry? And what gap were you trying to fill when you founded your company?
Well, Ken, it's interesting how I got my start. I love computers, love fixing them. Since I've been a kid, I've always wanted to tinker in the garage and always enjoyed a sense of accomplishment for fixing something that's broken, right? I'm passionate about keeping e-waste out of the landfill too. So it's a combination of things. Those are a small piece of the puzzle though. I really got my start several years ago when I met someone who was actually just selling a couple computers on Craigslist really cheap. And I was like, I need a couple computers. And I was in a financial position at the time that wasn't that great. And so it was like affordable. And we got to talking and he was like, I got a lot of these computers. Would you maybe have an interest in helping me sell them or something like that? And it really it kind of ballooned into being his employer's preferred vendor for taking away their old computers and disposing of them. So it was kind of like a little thing that was just, you didn't realize what it was going to turn into. Things kind of started to grow and here we are today.
Wow. Yes. So someone told you about a problem they were having and asked if you wanted to help them solve it.
Yep, absolutely.
Very cool. Yes. So in the IT asset disposition space, what separates truly professional providers from companies that are just moving equipment around? And what should businesses be looking for?
Well, Ken, there's a lot of asset disposition providers out there. Customers have choices, right? We have choices when it comes to what restaurant we choose to eat at, what car we choose to buy. So With that being said, people have choices when it comes to IT asset disposition. Professional providers, we know how to handle data security. We take no risk when it comes to data security. We also know that your time is valuable and you need someone to help manage the process. That's why you're calling us, because you're not able to manage it yourself. So, businesses should look for a provider that has a positive reputation and that listens to what their business needs. Contact providers, let them know what problem you're trying to solve and see what solution they have in mind for you. I'm a smaller company, but I can still offer custom tailored solutions that are more affordable than some of the larger companies like mine. It's really important, as with anything, whether you're choosing a contractor for your home or choosing an IT asset disposition provider, that you interview that company that you're looking to hire and make sure they're going to be able to fit your needs of your business.
Very good.
And
So Nick, Enterprise Asset Solutions offers an innovative recycling program. How does it work, and what is new or different about your program?
Well, Ken, there's not any one size fit all for our programs, but our base core foundational program it's really simple. We offer free local pickup anywhere within 50 miles of the Omaha, Lincoln, and Council Bluffs metro areas. And that's for business customers who commit to and agree to use our services. We will not charge for pickup of any e-waste. That includes e-waste that has a cost to us to dispose, such as flat panel monitors, printers, even the tube monitors. We do not charge our business customers for those. Oftentimes I'm asked, wow, how are you able to do this? Well, it's pretty simple. When we're your exclusive provider, we can get some of that cost back through refurbishment and remarketing of the other assets that still have value. It is one thing that sets me apart from some of my competition. I also offer free certificates of data destruction and chain of custody, as well as I will continue to do it this way. We also offer free certificates of data destruction, chain of custody. We even have a bin program for our smaller companies like MSPs or managed service providers, where I'll place my totes, however many they want. They might, I've got a client that has 3 totes and they call me when those 3 totes are full. I have clients that have 5 totes, and we'll place those totes in your location. If you call me when they're full, and we'll stop by and pick them up when it's convenient for you. And I also even cover the upfront investment of the totes, so that there's no investment on the client's part, and we just handle the rest. They do have our logos on them, as well as our phone number, and then they do have a barcode on them as well for tracking purposes, so that we know where that tote is at all times, what location it's assigned to,
and what goes into bins.
Or
what typically is in those bins.
Typically, we'll see computers go into them. We'll see monitors. We'll see, they're not very big totes, so they work for those smaller companies that don't have tons and tons of volume. The companies that have the higher volume will typically palletize or stack in an area, that in their inventory areas, things like that.
And then you come and pick up those pallets.
Yep.
Very good. Well, Nick, for someone who's never used a professional IT asset disposition service, can you walk us through what a proper disposition process should look like from pickup to final disposal?
Yeah, Ken, that's pretty easy. I can definitely walk you through that process. Now, you do have to bear in mind, every customer's needs can be a little bit different. However, I can give you and the listeners a little bit of a breakdown of a more common pickup for how Enterprise Asset Solutions may handle it.
Great.
So let's take the example of the bins that we can provide our customers. So we'll have the bins staged in a customer's location where they prefer them to be located, and where they'll store those items for disposal. Oftentimes, for a lot of customers, it may be in a secure area of the facility, because we're talking about data security.
Yes.
So they'll work on filling those bins up, and then they'll give me a call or send me an email to schedule a pickup, and we'll agree on the date and time and who will be on site handling pickup, who will we be working with and letting us into the facility to pick that up. And then we'll also discuss how much material may need picked up. Generally speaking, with the totes, it's, you can drive there with a small vehicle or SUV, but sometimes when you have a larger pickup, and you've got to have a large truck on site. So we'll coordinate that with the point of contact, and maybe even make an arrangement for a site visit just to get a better idea. when you're a professional in this industry, you coordinate that well with the customer so that you're meeting their expectations on arrival. And the most important thing that we do is everything is tracked from using a GPS application from departure to arrival. And the question is, well, why is it GPS tracked? There's that chain of custody that we talked about before.
Mm-hmm.
The chain of custody process is important to know where their items are going and who's handling them. So we do that and take that very, very seriously. Once I arrive at the location, we load up everything. And then once the material arrives here at my location, everything is entered into inventory that has data security concerns, primarily going to be your hard drives. Those are removed from the units, inventoried with a tracking tag. And then depending on the situation, if it's later in the day and we're not able to get to destroying the drives immediately, those drives will be loaded into a safe. And then as soon as we can, usually no more than a week, those drives are pulled from the safe. Chain of custody is updated and we go ahead and crush those. So kind of a lot of detail that happens with this process can get even more complex than that, but that's your basic pickup.
Nick, you mentioned data security multiple times, and you just talked about destroying the hard drives themselves. What should companies know about data destruction methods, and what certifications or documentations should they expect from their IT asset disposition provider?
There are several certifications in the IT asset disposition industry. A lot of them deal with primarily data destruction and how it's handled. The two real common certifications in the industry are R2 and NAID. R2 certification aligns with best practices for disposal, environmental, and security. And then the NAID certification is more aligned with best practices and standards in relation to data destruction. To be in this industry, it's not a requirement to have these certifications. And it's really important that the listeners understand that just because you have a certification doesn't mean you're qualified, right? So, there's companies out there in the industry that they have 100 different certifications, but are they following those certifications? That's a great question that gets asked often. They're actually subject to regular audits from these certifying bodies.
Okay. Yes.
Becoming certified is an obstacle that a company of my size is unable to overcome right now. And people may ask, well, why can't you become certified? It actually has to do in relation to the size of my company. There's a lot of requirements that you have to meet. You have to have a minimum facility size, things like that. As a small operation, it's hard for me to become certified without investing in a massive facility that unfortunately I can't overcome because unfortunately I'm not in a position, I'm not big enough. So it is challenging. It's tough for a business like mine to be in because you want to get every customer you can, right?
Sure.
But you can't because some of them will require that certification. But like I said, at the end of the day, you have to look at what is best for you and your company. And you have to remember too that just because you have a certification does not mean you're qualified. When you hire a company like mine that's smaller, you've got the guy that takes your call, the guy that goes out and talks to you, the guy that does the work. It's all me. So you're getting that quality work is regulated by one person, and that's the owner who has the stake in the business.
There you go.
But
yes. So that confidence and trust.
Absolutely. Yep. And that's where most of my customers chosen to do business with me because I'm a small company and they know they can trust the owner who has a large stake in the operation of his company. And however, what I will tell you is the supply chain partners that I work with, they all maintain those certifications.
Okay.
And I go the extra step of making sure that hard drives are destroyed on site at my facility, my location. And I'm going to walk you through kind of how those steps work. I know we briefly talked about that.
Sure.
But hard drives are removed from the safe, brought to a workstation where we begin the destruction process. The entire destruction process from start to finish is recorded. Scanning each drive's
video
model.
recorded.
Yep, video recorded.
Okay.
We scan each drive's model, a serial, and inventory tag. And when you're watching that recording, you actually see the hard drives getting added into the spreadsheet in real time. So you're actually watching a screen recording of the entire screen.
Wow.
So you're able to see the entire process from start to finish. We scan the hard drive serial number, the hard drive model number, as well as our dedicated inventory tag that is installed on each drive. And then during that whole process, you actually get to watch the hard drive get crushed as well.
Wow.
No hard drive, as a policy of my own, is ever reused. It's just a data security risk that I do not want to be involved with or take. I take security very seriously. There are other companies that, they'll follow the NAID protocol for wiping drives.
Right.
And for some organizations that may keep most of their data on the cloud, that's okay.
Mm-hmm.
I do not like to take those risks, and so that's how I've chosen to go about it. After we go through that process, once the drives are crushed by me, there's no chance of recovery.
Right.
And I think it's pretty clear. But we take it one step further. We put those drives into our bins, a dedicated bin for that client,
Yes.
and it is taken over to our supply chain partner, where our supply chain partner will run it through their drive shredder.
Oh.
And that partner, again, is going to be an R2 certified facility. So, again, remember, Ken, these drives are destroyed already by us. There's no chance of recovery, but we're taking them to a facility that is secure and they get ran through the shredder. The likelihood of anybody ever getting somebody's data, if they're doing business with us, pretty slim to none. I'm pretty confident in that.
Pretty clearly.
Yep.
Yeah. I don't know if we mentioned this before, but I was the IT director at 3 different private colleges and universities earlier in my career. And I never got to see videos of our equipment getting destroyed. I did receive a certificate of destruction, but wow, that's really cool.
And we provide that too.
That's great.
It's my way of assuring the customer that because I don't have a way to get the NAID and R2 certification, this is my way of giving them that extra peace of mind.
Right.
And I don't charge for it either.
So it sounds like you go above and beyond. I can't imagine the standards require drives to be both crushed and shredded.
Yeah, it's more of just an added value that the customer receives.
Absolutely. No, absolutely. Again, if I were still sitting in that IT director seat, I would appreciate both of those aspects, and especially the ability, if I want to, I can see a recording of that particular device being shredded, knowing, yes, that was one of my drives. Wow, very good.
Yeah.
Huh.
I did. So before the drives are crushed, the circuit boards are removed. This is because we're compensated a little bit differently for boards than drives. The boards do not, it's important to note that boards do not contain any data on them. They contain the operational keys, so to speak, for the drive to function. They basically contain the firmware that tells the drive how to communicate with the computer. And in terms of a old spinning hard drive that's in a traditional computer that has platters on it, those boards are separated from the drive before crushing, just because they're, like I said, they're paid for a little bit differently in the process. So we have to make sure we separate that material. Now, you have the modern SSD hard drives.
Yes.
Those are a little trickier because they don't have any moving parts or platters. The data is stored on the board. The drive crusher that we use actually has an attachment designed for SSDs. It'll basically crush it into little chips. So once we have enough material to deliver that material to the R2 certified facility, they run it through their shredder and sell that raw material back to the supply chain, which gets put into new components again.
There you go.
One last thing, noting with the data destruction process.
Yes.
We use the simple chain of custody form that establishes what has happened with that drive. And it has all the process from when the time it was picked up to the time it was turned over to the supply chain. And that ties in with why we use the GPS, and it helps us remember the appropriate times for the chain of custody. And then once the process is complete, we'll send that certificate of data destruction, the complete serial listing of all drives destroyed, the chain of custody form, and then a private link to the video of the entire destruction process. And we retain all of this on file for 10 years in the event the customer would ever need access to it down the road for compliance purposes. Maybe they're selling the business and there's questions of where's your old
Right.
data gone, things like that. So we do retain all that, but we do send all that as well to the point of contact. And the private video link is actually just a YouTube video link. And it's a
Okay.
private link that only they can view or anybody with the link can view.
Right.
So we take that very seriously as well. That we make sure that we let them know that if they share it with anybody else can share it as well.
Right.
It's a very functional way of doing it and works very well
Absolutely.
and helps our customers out.
Wow. Very good. Well, you've mentioned laptops and computers and things, the things you typically see. Have there been more challenging or specialized assets you've encountered? And how do you approach situations like that?
Yeah, absolutely. There's always going to be challenges in this industry. So probably some of the most challenging assets I've encountered are those that have specialized use cases. Assets that you wouldn't walk into Best Buy and be able to purchase. I've gone into data centers and removed entire racks of servers, switches, storage arrays, and all the accessories that make them run. I had a really challenging removal several years ago. We were tasked with removing several racks of storage array, and it was a storage array for the entire enterprise. We were talking 600 terabytes of storage space, which is a lot 10 years ago.
A lot of disks. Yeah.
Correct. And so it was challenging because of a lot of reasons. One, it was a shared space in an IT world. It's called a co-location data center.
Yes.
And there's a lot of security protocols involved with getting into those facilities.
Right.
As a contractor, having to be escorted by not only their employees, but the employees of the company you're contracting for. And then you have a lot of people don't really understand how data centers operate, but they have a floor that's raised from the actual floor of the building. And in that floor contains all the cabling as well as it would be considered a duct space for the cooling systems for these.
Yes.
And they have these tiles that are on the floor that are removable. And some of them are vented tiles that allow the cooling to be blown underneath the racks. And when you're dealing with large racks of heavy hard drives, there were concerns about the weight moving across the floor. So we had to have that into consideration. And those tiles are designed to hold weight, but not statically weight moving across them. So
right.
The other challenge you run into is, all right, we've got these out of here. What do we do with this equipment? What does the customer want to do with this equipment?
Okay.
This particular customer was trying to sell it, and they had been trying to sell it for 2 years because they upgraded to a different array, and they just weren't having any luck. So they've wiped the data from the unit, and they've asked us to sell it for them. So contrary to what I would typically do and destroy hard drives, if the customer is asking that a product get sold and they get a return on that sale, if that's what the customer wants, we can do it, right? They've already understand the risks involved and they're okay with those risks. And so in that case, the challenge is typical consumer can't just walk in and buy a large storage array from your local Best Buy or your local computer shop.
That's right.
And so how do you sell something like this is the question. They were trying to sell it. They were trying to sell it for an unrealistic amount was the issue. There's not a lot of people out there looking to buy one of these. So you've got to get creative on how you're going to sell it. And you have to set the expectation with the client that, you're asking $250,000 for something that's 5 years old, and a company can go buy the same thing for $400,000 and have more storage space.
Yeah.
You got to have a realistic price. So I pulled an old eBay trick out of the book and put that on eBay for a very competitive price. They were listed on eBay for about $50,000. I put mine on for $28,000. Got into negotiations with the buyer, and we sold it for $20,000. Now you might say, wow, from $250,000 to $20,000, that's a huge loss. You have to remember, we could have tried to sell it for $250,000 and sat on it for 2 more years.
Right.
And at that point, it is now worth the scrap value of the unit.
Right.
So you have to be realistic And you have to understand that the market for something like this is very small. And so sometimes it's a matter of you got to take what you can get. And if you can get
Right.
$20,000 for something versus $500 in scrap value, you got to
Yep.
take it. And so
There you go.
that's probably the most
Okay.
challenging aspects of this business is you may have a customer who has something that has a small market and high expectations. How do you deliver on that high expectation while still maintaining a profitable business? And,
Mm-hmm.
there's costs involved with getting that stuff out, whether it may be
Absolutely.
obtaining security clearances or renting specialized equipment to help you get it out of there, things like that.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
One of the advantages, um, being in the industry for an extended period of time, I've been doing it for 20 years, is
Wow.
I built up industry contacts. I have partners that I work with. Even some of my competitors, I'll work with them. If somebody's got something that I can't quite handle because it's a little bit too much in size,
Mm-hmm.
I can handle it because I have partners that I work with that will help me through the process. And it's really important that I note when that happens, I'm there. I'm still your point of contact.
Okay.
I'm still handling. I'm not pushing you off to somebody else when it comes out to pull out 12 racks out of that data center and remove them. My partner's name may be on that truck, but I'm on site. I'm coordinating the efforts. I'm answering your questions. I'm not pushing you off to another company. That's the important thing. And
Fantastic.
that's
Right.
something that I'm proud of with myself is building those contacts with these other organizations
Right.
and having those resources available. And that's what helps me maintain a smaller company.
Mm-hmm. Right. Very smart. Very smart. Well, something we haven't touched on very much yet. You mentioned environmental impact some, but sustainability is becoming increasingly important to businesses. And how does proper IT asset disposition contribute to environmental goals? And what should companies know about the recycling process?
That's a great question. But the process is simple. Keep as much as you can out of the landfill. As with all processes, there's some things that just can't be recycled. But I would say less than 1% of the material I receive ends up in the landfill.
Wow.
It's usually going to be small little things like twisty ties or bags that don't have your 1 through 7 recycling number
Mm-hmm.
assigned to them. It's important that companies know, depending on where you're operating, there also may be state or federal laws that mandate you recycle e-waste. I can
Mm-hmm.
tell you in the state of Nebraska, businesses are required to dispose of e-waste properly. There's few exemptions to that. I'd be more than willing to help a business understand if they need to be recycling their e-waste or not. However, that doesn't happen very often because my services are free. It's a no-brainer. Call me up and I'll help you. But if you have questions regarding that, I'm always happy to answer some of those questions. It's important that people know I'm not providing legal advice with this. So it's always good
Got it.
to have a compliance or lawyer involved for your business with questions regarding this, but I can answer some of your basic questions. And like I said, with my services being free, there should be no reason not to recycle.
Got it. Yeah, very good. If they just know about the availability and the fact that of the need to recycle
And
those responsibly.
absolutely. And like I said, it's also on top of everything else, it's a fantastic way to maintain a positive public image.
There you go. Sure, sure. Are there compliance standards or certifications around the environmental recycling side of things? Yeah.
R2 is really going to be your biggest one
Okay.
that really focuses on the environmental aspects. They do have some security requirements built into that as well. Any facility that's R2 actually has to have signage indicating that they're an R2 certified
Okay.
facility and they're following certain protocol for keeping things
Okay.
secure. So they don't focus just on the environmental, but the biggest thing is processes. They have processes defined
Mm-hmm.
for proper methods of disposal. And the biggest thing that any provider doing IT asset disposition is a good steward of recycling of e-waste is reuse as much as you can. It's you even when you talk about the 3 R's, reduce, reuse, recycle, right?
Yes.
So reduce, try to use as little as you can. When you can't do that, reuse as much as you can. And the last but not least is whatever can't be reduced or reused, you recycle it. So that's where a lot of people don't really understand that. ITAD process. And a lot of it
Right.
is refurbishing and rebuilding computers. I had to put them out there and get some more use. Even if there's times where I may sell a computer and somebody only gets 6 or 8 months out of it and pays a really low price for it, but we got more out of that computer. They didn't go and buy a brand new computer and contribute to adding more. Some companies, they replace their computers every 3 or 4 years because that's when they're out of warranty, and that's when it starts costing them money and lost productivity when they hit that out of warranty age, because now they're having to wait for a new computer to arrive or waiting for somebody to show up for repair. Whereas when they're under warranty, they can usually get that repaired within hours or sometimes
Right.
less than a day. So they take there's that risk to their business that they don't want to take of losing productivity. But that 3-year-old computer is great for Joe Smith, who might use it for home use and not
Right.
need to worry about a warranty concern, because if it stops working, he can take a couple days to get it fixed, things like that.
Right.
So we try to refurbish and reuse what we can. It's really important that I note, as I noted previously as well, certifications are valuable if your company is large enough to achieve those certifications.
Uh-huh.
And that's why I've chosen to work with R2 and NAID certified partners, because they take their corporate sustainability seriously. And
Yes.
when they're a big company, just like me, they have a lot at stake.
Right.
Yeah,
I want to circle back to one of your statements you made earlier, that you said you do not charge for your services. So for enterprise IT assets, whether it's servers or network equipment or whatever, and I think about storage arrays.
Yep.
I know from talking, I do enterprise storage array analysis, and I talk with all the providers.
Yep.
And disposing of end-of-life equipment, they cite as a significant expense that many organizations face. But they can dispose of those assets through you at no cost. Is that correct?
That's correct. If it's fully wiped already by the organization, and usually when they have those, they already wipe them before they turn them over, then the protocols don't have to be as stringent as far as pulling the drives out and serializing them.
Right.
I can take that directly to the R2 facility and just have them shred all the drives, and they'll just give me a bulk destruction certificate for it. So in terms of value, you're running the risk of being pretty close to a break even on that, because you're talking maybe $400 to $500 in scrap and maybe $400 to $500 in cost to get it hauled out.
Right.
But that's where I don't charge for my services as long as we have an agreement. I get everything. So I'm able to make up, and because.
So what are the biggest misconceptions you run into that companies have about IT asset disposition, and how do those misconceptions cost them?
That's a great question, Ken. The biggest myth: IT asset disposition costs too much. It doesn't. There are companies just like mine all over the country who do our services for free, or only charge for the difficult to dispose of items such as monitors, printers, televisions. Some companies have a similar operational model to mine. It's going to be your smaller one-man show type of. The cost of this misconception, they can be both directly to the bottom line and indirectly. Too many unutilized IT assets laying around is taking up valuable they may not need to be leasing, or could be better allocated to other parts of the business. Another myth that I would really like to touch on is sometimes people say, wow, you take all this stuff people give you for free and you sell it. You must be getting rich. Well, it's far from the case, because like I've told you, there's stuff that I don't charge for. There's costs involved in refurbishing equipment. When we don't reuse hard drives can be costly to procure. So you're buying a hard drive. You may have a battery that's gone bad in a laptop.
Right.
You may have different components. Perfect example, I've got some laptops that I'm working with right now. Yeah, they were received as part of a deal. I didn't have to pay anything for them, but they didn't have power supplies. They didn't have memory, didn't have hard drives. Each laptop, I'm about $75 in, and I'm selling them for about $100 to $125. And if you think about the time It can be anywhere from 1 to 3 hours to refurbish
Oh,
one of those laptops, time invested. We're making less than $5 an hour at that point. So,
uh-oh.
there's a big picture involved. Now, there's
Mm-hmm.
some items that you receive that item and it's in really good condition and it requires a little less, and you might make really, really good money on that
Right.
item. But it's
Right.
not an everyday thing, because most of the time when items are coming to you, whether it be from just a regular consumer
Mm-hmm.
or a business, it may be very end of life. One thing that's been discussed quite a bit is the Windows 10. The Windows 10 thing is kind of a big deal, and it could really be a
Yes.
whole nother long series. But a lot of the Windows 10 equipment that I'm receiving today there's no way to get it running Windows 11 properly. Will it run
Right.
Windows 11? Absolutely. And
Mm-hmm.
we do have a different approach to that. And many other ITAD providers have the same approach. But Windows 11 will run on these devices. And legally speaking, it will run. There's questions about, security or support from Microsoft that comes into play with that. Definitely don't recommend businesses run Windows 11 on these units, but for the consumer that might just be doing basic web browsing, stuff like that, there's no problem to that. And so there's a market for that out there.
Got it.
The value of that equipment is very low. We're talking a
Right.
computer that we can sell for $30 or $40.
Uh,
And so there's not a ton of profit to be made in that space, but we're trying to get a little bit more time out of that equipment. And it's important to note that some of these computers, they have been used very heavily in production environments, and they've lasted way longer than they should have. And so it's not just, you don't get computers that are 2 years old all day long. That's
no.
that's not an everyday thing. So, it's definitely helps with the income, but it's one of those things where unless you have, hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of laptops coming in every single day, you're not getting rich. But when you have that many coming in, you've also going to have a large facility. You're going to have a lot of overhead costs, things like that. So,
Right.
just like any business, there's no such thing, in my opinion, as getting rich quick. So,
Right. Yes. And by the way, I first contacted you because I had discovered that, like, my computers, my primary business computer was telling me it couldn't upgrade to Windows 11, but turned out the only thing holding it back was TPM 2.0 support. And that
yep,
computer actually supported it. It just wasn't enabled.
that was a
And
big
so
issue.
I did, from the research I did, there are 100 million computers globally that the only thing wrong with them or holding them back is that BIOS setting needs to be changed. So I did
So,
create a short video about that. And although I have a very small YouTube channel, it has now been viewed over 19,000 times.
it's one of those things where I don't know if you um, were aware of why that happened. If you aren't, or
Go ahead.
even your viewers aren't aware, a lot of the reason why the TPM was not enabled on those is because Microsoft was in the process of developing, Windows 11 at the time, and they weren't setting clear standards out to the manufacturers as to what the requirements were going to be. So manufacturers were sticking with the way that they'd done it, not
Mm-hmm.
enabling the TPM chips because they weren't needed. And it's created a lot of headaches.
Oh, yeah.
It's created some headwinds for my business. I'm not going to lie. It's helped, but I definitely don't want to tell people, yeah, you need to recycle that, because, I will be honest with people and tell them, this is probably fine. But some of my clients, I'm receiving products because they're an MSP. They've already had those conversations with the customer, and it's not my
Right.
responsibility to interject their business
Right.
decisions.
Yes.
It's my job to make stuff that they tell me to make go away. It's just kind of a positive for me because I'll receive
Sure.
something that's an 8th gen or 9th gen Intel that's very capable of it.
Yes.
And they thought it needed to go away. And so those are those small wins that you get in this business.
There you go. There you go. What other major trends are reshaping the IT asset disposition industry, particularly with the shift toward remote work?
Yeah, that's a great question, Ken. remote work has actually had a huge impact on the
Oh,
IT asset disposition industry. Really, just like the IT industry as a whole, you have so many different moving parts happening. Um, Nowadays, when organizations are going through refresh projects, rather than ordering, all new devices and having them shipped directly to their location on a pallet, some employers are ordering their replacements directly from the manufacturer and having it, you can order them already configured
yes.
with your corporate image already on it and things
Yep.
like that, or using things like Azure or Intune to image and build the operating system remotely so that when the user receives a computer, they plug it in, power it up, connect it to the internet, and it builds itself.
Right.
That's a huge change that's been really recent in the industry. However, that's created some headaches because
Hmm.
when it's directly shipped to the end user and it's mostly ready to go out of the box with minimal setup, what's happening with that equipment when it's done? Since that user may be remote 400 miles away from the service center, what is that user doing with that equipment when they're done with it?
Huh?
When it's time for the new laptop to come? Some companies are having the user ship that back to their headquarters 400 miles
Mm-hmm.
away. Some companies are requiring that they hand deliver it to them or ship it at their own expense. And some companies are telling them, just keep it, do what you want with it.
Right.
Obviously, we don't like to see that, but sometimes that works for the company because all their data these days is located remotely in the cloud, so to speak.
Okay.
And so important critical data is really not even stored on that computer. So they're okay with it. They can also remotely wipe the computer and
Mm.
tell the user to keep it, do what they want with it. But it
Okay.
still opens you up to some recycling issues. Because what if that user doesn't want that computer but is told to keep it? I'll just throw it in the trash. It becomes a legal question of, is that because that person now owns that computer? Are they throwing it away or is it the company throwing it away?
Uh-huh.
Becomes the question. So, that's where I'm evaluating my processes and procedures and I'm looking at the possibility of adding the ability to, with companies that I work for, if they have an arrangement like that and where they're telling their users to keep the computer, they can send them a label that will basically ship that unit to me for proper disposal and recycling. It's something I'm evaluating. When when remote work became a big deal, it was very good for our business because you had people who were out there. COVID, perfect example.
Oh, yes.
When COVID happened, there was a mad scramble to get laptops for every
Yes.
employee, and laptops were very short supply. So
Mm-hmm.
companies like mine were really benefiting because we had used laptops that were in very good condition, and the consumer was buying them because their employer wasn't going to pay for a laptop and they were buying them so that they could remote into their desktop at the office. Employers were buying used laptops because it was all they could get. And
Right.
so we were selling laptops like faster than we could get them. But it also created a problem where laptops weren't really coming in. They were going out, but they weren't
Right.
coming in. So it really changed just overall. It made substantial changes to our industry just because of how some of these companies have changed their operational procedures and
Right.
policies with the things I've discussed before, having the employee keep the computer, things like that. So
So
been
what
a
would you
big
say
shift in the industry.
for those organizations that have embraced either partially or in whole this remote work approach? What are the best policies in your view? Again, I know you're not an attorney,
Yep.
but
Yep.
if I'm one of your clients and I ask you, what do you think I should do? How should I handle this? What would be your advice?
My advice would be always recycle responsibility. Re- All right, we'll start this over. My advice would be always recycle responsibly. Follow your processes. If you're looking to change your process, reach out, see what I can do to help, or see what your current ITAD provider can do to help. If that
Mm-hmm.
involves changing the way you do business to something where you're having the user ship it to your location and then your disposition provider is showing up and picking them up, and you're not currently doing that, or if that's working out an agreement with a company like mine where the user ships the computer directly to me for disposal,
Mm-hmm.
you really just want to evaluate it. Talk with your legal team and your compliance team if you have them. Make sure that what you're doing is going to follow data compliance and stuff like that. Some industries have telecommunications industry It has a lot of stuff with what's called CP&I, customer proprietary information,
Okay.
where are there compliance concerns with that? Maybe not
Got it.
with the remote user's laptop because everything's stored through cloud applications, things like that. But those are all things you have to consider as a business. Again, like you said, I'm not an attorney, but I can help you with some of those processes in terms of if it's not working the way you're doing it, let's evaluate what I can do for you.
Right. And what I heard you say, the summary statement would be continue to take responsibility for the recycling of that equipment.
Absolutely.
Probably that involves ship it back to us or ship it to our known provider. Someone is going to dispose of it appropriately and protect your confidential information that possibly might be there. That would be peace of mind as well as be a good neighbor, right?
Yeah. I've also seen some companies use your tools at your disposal, like Intune, remotely wipe that computer. And some employers have said, well, we'll sell this computer to you for $10. And then their viewpoint is because they sold that computer, they no longer own that asset. So
Right.
that helps them out too. But obviously you're going to want to talk to your individuals that are in charge of handling your tax compliance, things like that.
Got it.
Because when it comes to writing off assets,
wow. Well,
there's compliance. So,
right. Well, you've been very generous with your time. I just have two more questions for you, Nick.
Yeah.
If you were advising an IT manager or business owner on selecting an IT asset disposition provider for the first time, what should be their top 3 selection criteria?
The most important thing I can tell you is talk to the provider you're looking to do business with. Kind of like I touched on before, interview that provider, ask questions and know what your needs are. And you want to make sure you know what your needs are so that they can meet your needs. Make sure you set those expectations with your vendor as well, so they know what to expect. And like we've discussed before, if certifications are important to you, ask about their certifications. But it's always important to remember, certifications don't always mean that who you're hiring is qualified. When evaluating a provider, the 3 things you really want to look for is, can this provider meet my current, future, and long-term needs? And then how does this provider keep your data safe? What does that process look like? How long has the provider been in business? Do they have references or reviews? So those are the big 3 for me.
For viewers who want to take action on their IT asset challenges, what's the best way to get started and how can they learn more about your services in particular?
The best way to get started, Ken, is anyone interested in learning about what enterprise asset solutions might be able to do for you, visit our website. It's www.easomaha.com. I will say my expertise is hardware and that, not building websites. My website is relatively basic. However, it's also somewhat intentional. And the reason is because I enjoy conversation with people. I believe you can learn more about people and their needs by chatting with them on the phone or face to face.
Yes.
So your basic questions are answered on my website. But if you have complex questions or custom needs that you would like me to tailor a program to you, call, email, and we can facilitate a call or a meeting virtually if needed. My contact number is also on the website. You're always more than welcome to reach me directly by phone.
Great.
One of the biggest differences between enterprise asset solutions and other companies is when you pick up a phone and you call me, you don't talk to a robot. You don't talk to an individual that doesn't know the answer to your question. You're talking to the owner. You're talking to, do I always have all the answers? Maybe for your particular situation, no, but I can usually figure it out pretty quick. And so, I even answer the phone on the weekends. I've had customers fill out the form on a Saturday, expecting to hear from me on a Monday or Tuesday, and they get a call within an hour and they're just blown away.
Very cool.
A lot of that just happens to do with the fact that I'm a small company. Earning business is important to me. And so it's kind of one of those things where when you're a small business, you take care of your customers and your community. And due to the size of my company, I am a home-based business. So I don't have a dedicated, massive facility as we've talked about before.
Right.
And I have some clients that prefer to bring their material to me, some business clients that bring their material to me. And I do work with those clients and I do allow them to bring it here. I run by appointment for that reason.
Mm-hmm.
And so that it's important that I note that when I do those appointments, I'm very flexible with my appointment times, and I want to work with that client and do what's best for them.
Very good. And remind us, what is your service area overall for Enterprise Asset Solutions?
I cover the Omaha Metro, Council Bluffs, and Lincoln, all the metro areas, usually within 50 miles of those areas.
Okay.
I can go farther, but it's something we definitely have to talk about, negotiate before I can agree to.
Got
I
it.
just have to make sure that it is something that would fit within my operational abilities
Very good.
and such. I do have one thing I want to touch on too.
Yeah, please.
And really reinforce. One of my biggest core values is giving back to the community that I operate in. And this is done in various ways, maybe community recycling events, donations, event sponsorships, affordable pricing on quality used equipment for nonprofits. I've worked with a couple nonprofits recently on providing them affordable technology upgrades.
Yes.
And then I have a referral program too. Anybody that refers me to a business that might be needing my services, I give you $100 cash in your pocket just for your referral. As long as that turns into an agreement with that business, I'll give you $100 cash. But
Wow.
you remember, I like supporting local business too. So
Yes.
I sweeten the pot a little bit. If somebody is willing to get a gift card instead of cash, I'll give them a $125 gift card, but it has to be to a local business. That's something that will always be important to me, is supporting local and supporting our community. And I've done some recycling events with churches where I contribute a portion of the proceeds back to the church as well. It's something I'm proud of and like to do. And it's just a good environmental thing to do.
It's a computer recycling day sponsored
Yep.
by a local entity, usually a
Yep.
nonprofit.
I-
That's cool. That is very cool.